So joining us now for some more details is Peter Anderson, Chief Investment Officer and founder of Anderson Capital Management. Peter, thank you so much for helping us kick off the trading week. We know quantum computing is getting a lot more attention yet again. And so what do you see as driving that renewed interest, and why now?
Well, I think that we're all digesting artificial intelligence, but we all have on our mind, higher speed computing and super capabilities. So quantum is the next step in that. And of course, we've seen recently several companies in their infancy, practically, launching IPOs under quantum computing. So right now it's very early stage, but we do have several opportunities. If you are an investor in quantum computing, there are several opportunities out there. However, it is very, very early stage.
Peter, if we could, can you take a step back with us? And quantum, it sounds complex. It is complex.
Yes.
And we do this daily, and I'm still kind of like, what's the difference between quantum and some of these advancements that we're seeing in AI? Do you want to try to turn this into layman's terms for us?
Yes, and that is probably the most challenging sector ever to convert to layperson's terminology is quantum computing. If you were a physics major like me, you're used to throwing around terms like Hilbert spaces, Hermitian operators, Brockhat notation, but of course none of that makes sense to anybody that doesn't have a physics degree, right? So the best way to look at this is think of it as a system that is just very, very hyper efficient at solving very complicated problems. Kind of different from AI, where AI does help you with creative solutions. This is more like a high-speed mule, although that's kind of an oxymoron, but it's a high-speed mule that will grind through these tremendously challenging optimization problems. I'm sure you've all heard of the traveling salesperson problem. You've got 50 cities, you want to go to each city, but in which order should you go to those cities so that you say you minimize your gasoline expenses? That is a classic optimization problem that quantum computing just will eat up for lunch.
Okay, and that was a really great way to explain. I wish I would have had that explainer like 2 years ago when we first started talking about the entire quantum space, because it has been difficult to understand, as it's fairly complicated. And there are several of these, say, competing approaches like superconducting, trapped ion, and photonic.
Yes.
So how do you compare these technologies, and do you see right now a clear leader?
I personally do. And, there are, as you mentioned, there are competing technologies. And what's so difficult is, as a potential investor, you're not going to learn the physics because it just is going to take too many brain cells and too many years of studying quantum mechanics. So is there a way around that? And there's a couple of lessons or advice I can give at this point. The main driver, in our opinion, is, do you have to be an absolute zero? A lot of these competitors have to operate in absolute zero. So the picture that you see of the iconic picture now of Google with it looks like a very giant golden chandelier. That is operating, believe it or not, at minus 460 degrees Fahrenheit, near absolute zero, colder than outer space. There are other ways of doing this that are not. So you can have a neutral atom, that's what it's called, processor, and that does not require ultra cold environments. That is at room temperature. So as a former physicist, I will tell you this. I would go for the models that do not require the ultra low temperature. Why? Well, just think of how complicated that is and how sensitive it is to those ultra low temperatures. Whereas if you have a room temperature quantum computer, that's going to be, at least you can knock off one of the complexities, which would be maintaining that ultra low temperature. There are other parameters, but I would say right now the main driver is, how can you bring these things to market with the least technical complications? And so let's just cross off the ultra cold and stay with the room temperature.
Peter, a lot of this is very theoretical at the moment as it's working towards trying to make breakthroughs, but and I know that can make it difficult to kind of project into the future and predict things. But from just solely a theoretical academic conversation, I have a hard time not imagining if some company or group of companies makes a breakthrough, that once that breakthrough happens, they don't accelerate the gap between where they are and everybody else.
Yes.
When you're looking at this from an investment or a prediction standpoint, how big of a breakthrough is needed for that to happen?
Yes. Yeah. Very perceptive question. And I will tell you this. We understand the physics completely. You know, there are Nobel Prize winners that are working on this now, heading up companies. So it isn't that there will be a breakthrough on the theoretical physics side. That is, believe it or not, that's all been established since the 1920s. So we get the weirdness of quantum mechanics. The issue is, more importantly, the mechanical, the technology to implement the quantum mechanical model. So I would say they're probably, the breakthrough to me is already happening, which is they're achieving it at room temperature. All the other issues are more or less physical challenges, not theoretical challenges. Could I see somebody having, let me coin the phrase quantum leap, since we are talking about quantum mechanics? I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you're going to see is a horse race among these different technologies, but the leading edge, the nose ahead of everybody else, I think, at this point at least, is the room temperature operators.
Okay, and we do know that from NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, who said, I mean, like all of these quantum stocks on a bit of a tizzy of years ago, or about a year ago, I think it was at this point, that he sees the time frame of this like decades away. I mean, so how do you gauge some of the expectations for like when we could see this technology more everyday utilized and actually like coming to market, basically?
That's interesting, because I agree that I think we are overestimating the next 3 years of the development, but then we are underestimating, say, the next 10 to 15 years. But I'm telling you right now, they are on the verge. There's certain companies are very close to getting what is called quantum supremacy, which simply means, you know, low error corrections. That's the other thing we didn't talk about, is these things can be almost like the Wright brothers first flying their plane, you know, very fragile, just a couple of feet off the ground, but they're proving that flight exists. With quantum computing, they are having errors. So they turn this machine on, and for a short time it's working, and then all of a sudden it gets plagued by errors. So the error correction process is moving at an incremental pace. Maybe there would be a breakthrough in that, but I don't think so. I think this is just a steady grind to building a larger and larger computer that will actually solve some problems. And I also want to tell you that they are having some success, early success with, say, quantum chemistry, for instance, and material science. I mean, these problems, one thing I should also emphasize is these are not going to be household computers. They're going to be doing word processing for us. These are very specialized problems that are highly technical and involved mainly in, say, what we call optimization problems, or quantum chemistry, material science, pharmaceuticals, for instance.
Okay, really great conversation. We so appreciate your time today, and a really great breakdown, honestly, on quantum, which can get fairly in the weeds, as of course we are not experts ourselves, but so appreciate it.
Right.
Peter Anderson, Chief Investment Officer and founder at Anderson Capital Management.